Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates, First Data Resources, and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the UNO Television Studios, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome once again to Consider This. My guest today has a medical pedigree that's, well, I don't know, haven't seen one any better around here. But he's just down to earth, and that's why I like to talk to him. Plus, he's full of information. Dr. Henry Lynch, welcome. It's been a number of years since I've spoken with you. Now, and listen to this, folks. This is just, this isn't even the tip of the iceberg, but just to give you an idea who this guy is. He's professor and chair of preventative medicine and public health at Creighton University, founder and director of the Hereditary Cancer Institute, co-director of Hereditary Cancer Prevention Center, one of his babies there at Creighton, and director of the Creighton Cancer Center. Cancer, in case you haven't figured it out, is kind of his bag. And welcome to Consider This. Hereditary cancer, we've heard so much about the Human Genome Project. Mm-hmm. You've been working on tracking little bits of genetic information to cancer for a long time.
Approaching 40 years.
That's a long time.
I feel a few of those years too.
It's very in vogue now, and it's very, and I don't say that lightly,
sure.
But it's a hot thing now, because genetics is so hot. But was it that hot when you started?
It sure wasn't. It was very difficult to get my colleagues, both in the research and clinical community, to accept the fact that there was more to cancer cause than cigarette smoking or asbestos or a whole list of other carcinogens. And I was talking about primary genetic factors. And it was hard to convince my colleagues that is a significant cause of cancer. And at least 5 to 10% of all cancer has a primary genetic cause. But I tell you, it's easy now because we have the mutations, that is the molecular genetic basis for some of the syndromes that I was describing in the early and mid-1960s, so they can't wish this concept away. It's there and it'll be there forever.
I imagine then, even though we knew a lot about DNA back then, it was more just observational and causal and just putting things together and getting a lot of data, going through a lot of cases. But now, you can see that, and you can test somebody, and you can say, we're not making this up, and we know for a fact that this incidence occurs, and these people have this little genetic piece of information.
I couldn't describe it any better than what you've stated.
But
it's there. Oh yeah.
You were just kind of theorizing and hypothesizing.
Well, it was descriptive, and we performed what we call highly extended pedigrees. So we would probe as far as we could in the families and try to get every shred of documentation, and that's very important. Getting down to the basic pathology level. If a person said they had colon cancer, we wanted to prove that it really was colon and not another cancer that might have mimicked colon cancer or endometrial or the other cancers that went with the first major syndrome that we described at Creighton
That would be
University.
Lynch's
That's
syndrome?
Lynch syndrome, yeah.
Now, just a sidebar here. Does someone name it for you, or do you
Several people named it Lynch syndrome. I think the first was a gastroenterologist who's become a good friend of mine, and that was Rick Boland, and he's out at the University of California.
So, you don't just say, hey, this is mine.
No.
It's kind of an honor.
It is. It's a great honor, but I don't tout it. I tell them that it goes by another name, hereditary non-polyposis colon cancer, HNPCC, but it is
It's
Lynch
easier
syndrome.
to say Lynch
Well,
syndrome.
okay.
I'll
buy into that, yeah.
The thing that has, over the years, we have learned so much about, I can't tell you really anything about my genetic makeup, but you probably could if I fit into some category or this or that with breast cancer or ovarian cancer. But is it really good that we know if we're genetically predisposed?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's extremely important.
'Cause it's kind of a scary concept.
It is scary, but I think that it's better to know than not to know. But again, we get into a very delicate situation, and maybe if the patient has significant emotional problems, and knowing would cause undue psychological stress to the point that that individual's quality of life would be disturbed, and perhaps that individual should not be aware. But I
But
feel
if
badly.
they ask you,
Yeah, if
you have to tell them.
well,
right?
if they ask, and if we're talking about the family history and their risk, I would tell them. But unless they really were comfortable with knowing the germline mutation, that is the gene that causes cancer, I'd be a little more cautious in that. I would have to be comfortable, and they would have to be comfortable, that they can accept this information. And if they can, then through formal genetic counseling, we would explore all of the psychological concerns, their worries about insurance discrimination, or even intra-family strife, and all the kind of things, anxiety, fear. And if they found this acceptable, sure, we would tell them. But the important thing is, we would tell them all that we know about the disorder, about the availability for screening, and the costs that might be involved in if they fail to go through an insurance carrier for the screening, and even prophylactic surgery, which is becoming more popular.
Yeah, can you imagine 20 years ago someone saying, I'm considering having both my breasts removed?
Yeah. Well, I did that in the 1960s, and I was jeered off the stage, honest to God,
Really?
in Chicago at a major cancer meeting. And I mentioned I was working at that time, was in the late 60s, at the MD Anderson Hospital.
Very well known.
And yeah, oh sure, and as an oncologist and geneticist, and I told them that that would be one option. And the only time in my life, I countered with a few expletives here and there because it was terrible. They were jeering me. You would take off normal tissue, and they thought it was a joke. But I was talking about high-risk patients at enormous risk, and we had just described at that time the hereditary breast ovarian cancer syndrome, the same disorder that we have the BRCA1 and BRCA2, or we call BRCA1 and
You
BRCA2.
know for sure now what that
Oh, yeah,
gene actually
yeah.
is.
But it was more than a couple of decades before Mary Claire King and her colleagues identified the gene in that syndrome. But anyway, there was very strong feelings. Now, I'm glad you brought that up. I'll tell you why. In this week's issue of Oncology News,
I pick it up daily.
yeah, I'm sure you do. There is an article by a friend of mine at the Mayo Clinic who described this in the New England Journal of Medicine, her data showing the benefit. And now she's gone, that was with high-risk patients. Now she's gone to those that have the BRCA1 and the BRCA2 germline mutation. And she finds that there is a 90% likelihood that they won't get breast cancer if they undergo prophylactic bilateral mastectomy, removal of both breasts. in
That's
other words.
almost better odds than the rest of us sort of carry.
You're a pretty sharp lady. That's right on target. No kidding. Absolutely. And that lady, I just want the whole world to know, is Lynn Hartman, and she's a medical oncologist and a brilliant lady, and I'm proud to be a friend of hers. But her work is just absolutely impeccable.
But we've come so far in terms. The thing, though, that what's it like when and you've worked with different types of cancers. You've specialized in some, but you've done a lot of reading. When you find out that the odds are not, you'll tell a patient, but you can't tell them the odds are going to be any better. I'm sure there are some cancers that early detection isn't going to make a huge difference.
Is or is not?
Is not.
Oh, yeah,
Some
absolutely.
cancers.
And a good example of that is pancreatic cancer. And
Nasty thing.
It's a terrible disease, and we're deeply involved in that as we speak. As a matter of fact, next Monday I'm going to be addressing this in Virginia before the National Cancer Institute, some of our work. And that's one where we hope we will, through work with Randall Brand, a gastroenterologist at the University of Nebraska, and we're being funded by the state and by a spore that Margaret Tempero had, and we're trying to get at the earliest possible moment that a change in the pancreas occurs, and Randall is using what we call endoscopic ultrasound, and with secretin, that's a hormone, we're collecting, it stimulates the pancreas, we're collecting pancreatic juice, and we're going to screen it, and it is going to be done in individuals that have a mutation called P16 that indicates their risk for this disease is enormous by virtue of their position in the family.
Right, but all right, so we might have a situation here of a very highly fatal, wouldn't make a lot of difference, but what you're saying is the fact that you know that you have this gene,
Yes.
you can help, maybe not at the moment, but you can help create a situation down the road where with testing and developing further testing, where we can at some time, that there's a magic moment
Yes.
that will be discovered.
Absolutely.
discover.
We don't know what that magic moment will be.
But right
it's
now you don't have a clue.
Exactly, but it's hope. It's hope for an almost uniformly fatal disease. I hate to tell your audience that, but the outlook is so dismal with this disease by the time it's diagnosed. So we hope to diagnose it at the enzymatic and biochemical and oncogene level.
When it's sending out just all these little kind of messages that
we're
on the
faint
yeah.
signals.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a good way of putting it. Faint signals that maybe collectively might help the cause. And if we do see a pattern emerging, and this is patients from families that are markedly prone to pancreas as well as melanoma. It's interesting, but that's the syndrome. It's pancreatic cancer in the presence of hereditary melanoma. And if we're able to find substantial signaling, if you will, we would give the option, I emphasize option, of surgical removal of the pancreas. Now, how about that? But it's been done. And
I didn't know you could live with that.
you
I
can
mean,
live
obviously
without
you
it.
have to have insulin.
There are complications, or in other words, problems that emerge, such as diabetes mellitus, which is in this case difficult to manage. But the alternative may be much worse. So it's a risk balance type of thing.
The interesting thing is that you know, when we came to this turn of the millennium, which I know technically aren't there yet, but we kind of pretended we were when 2000 started, that one of the things that was brought out time and time again was that we tend to be really obsessed with cancer, you know, worried about, I mean, some people are. But 100 years ago, at the beginning of the previous millennium, people didn't live long enough. And now, one of the other things that's paralleling your work in the medical community is trying to live longer. So if we don't find out some of the answers to some of these cancers, a lot of people aren't going to be living longer anyway.
Exactly. That's true.
So, I mean, this is really not just important to cure the big C for me, but down the road when our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren hope to have a promising long life.
Sure. And you're absolutely correct. And I think to be involved in this type of work, you have to have some of the belief and confidence that something real good is going to come, emanate from it.
So you're an optimist.
Oh, I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to cancer. Oh, absolutely.
Even though you must see in your private practice and in the families that you work with in research,
many problems.
Very sad.
Very sad situations, yes. But it's a stimulus to have us work harder. That's what I try to do. And my team, I have a wonderful team at Creighton. Oh my gosh. I have a statistician that's so dedicated, Patrice Watson, she's a PhD.
You have nurses, doctors, oncologists, other kind of...
The team is absolutely one of the best, most committed people. I mean, I am biased, but it's true. They are outstanding.
They've said some nice things about you, too.
Well, okay. Well, that's nice.
You know, I'm sure people... I've done some other interviews with researchers over the years, and they always tend to feel compelled to mention all kinds of $4 words and things. And I think that there's not because they're trying to impress, just because they're trying to prove their credibility. You have never had to prove your credibility. What I mean is you're down to earth. I imagine your patients working with you really feel they're dealing with a human being, sometimes rather than just
I hope so.
a doctor.
Yeah.
I still remember the time you told me you used to be a boxer.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, that's true.
But you are the most atypical in personality of just most any researcher I've met.
Oh, really? Well.
Did boxing help you be a good oncologist?
Well, when I was a kid, I lived in a very with a very poor family during the Depression. There were so many like us, and we had to just kind of. It was in New York City in the slums, and you learned to fight your way very early to survive.
This
and
man has great hands for being a boxer. I don't know about being an oncologist.
And I got really very much interested in the scientific art of boxing, and so I became a boxer, and that was while I was in the Navy in World War II, and then after the Navy I began professional boxing.
So you were intrigued by the scientific method early on?
I really was, yeah. And
How
actually,
they take them apart, how they
sure.
work?
And I remember a book that none of the audience, well, maybe there are a couple of boxers by Gene Tunney, and famous Gene Tunney, and it was entitled A Man Must Fight. And I read that when I was just a young boy, and he was very scientific in his boxing, with a lot of skills. And I tried to emulate Gene Tunney, but miles, eons away from the skill of that famous fighter.
But you might be doing it in another fashion.
Well, that could be. That could be.
You know, trying to take it apart, put it back together. Cancer research is extremely expensive, as most research is.
It is.
Treatment of cancer is tremendously expensive, and not always with a good outcome. Where does cancer lie in sort of the economics of medicine?
Well,
Besides being costly.
As you've emphasized, it's extremely expensive to treat. And the hereditary cancer, where we make recommendations, which are more severe in the sense of cancer in the general population. I'll give you an example. In the HNPCC, or what you kindly call the Lynch syndrome, we recommend starting colonoscopy, for example, which is quite expensive, at age 25. And because of the rapid movement of cancer, where a tiny polyp can go to a cancer so rapidly, in that syndrome, we recommend annual colonoscopy. That's very expensive, and it chokes up some patients, particularly if they don't want to go through their insurance company because they're concerned about discrimination. But, you know, really, to put that in perspective, and I'm sorry for being so lengthy in my response.
No, I wanted to get to some of these things anyway.
But the important thing is that insurance carriers should really pick up the freight on this, because it has the potential of curative through colectomy with the earliest signs, that is, removal of the colon, at the earliest sign of a cancer. So you're saving a life.
I'm an insurance company, all right, Henry?
Yeah.
And I say, you know, the odds are I'm not going to be insuring that person 3 years down the road, because they're changing jobs now, and insurance coverage is changing for people, and people aren't staying with companies for 25 years, so I don't care. Do you see federal legislation or things?
It's been looming, but I stress looming in the sense that the legislation has not had the power, so to speak, to be able to restrict the insurance carriers from raising rates. They can't deny the policy if it's already enacted. They can't discard it, but they could deny a patient at high risk, because I can see that side of the coin, because they are betting that you're going to live long enough to pay enough to cover the premiums, of course.
Or your employers.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you can show radical improvement in some of these areas, and in the case of that breast cancer where you said a 90% less chance, or whatever it was, in other words, better odds than I have,
exactly,
then you're actually going to save the money.
That's the whole point.
But the
And-
long haul, we aren't
Yeah.
in for the long haul anymore economically.
Yeah, and that's well stated because this involves the saving of a life. It involves the lack of going through very costly chemo prevention, more costly radical surgery, and if the carriers could see that up front by expending a certain amount of funds to protect that patient, again, as you put it, over the long haul, the benefits to the insurance company, notwithstanding the life of the patient who may be the breadwinner in the family, so that mother or father can see the kids and grandkids cross the stage and get the diplomas. I mean,
Absolutely.
and that's the bottom line. And we believe that through more research, and we're working hard at it, that we'll be able to get enough data to convince the insurance carriers that it is prudent to spend money up front to defray the costs of this expensive screening, and that would be the carrot. The carrot would be the results, the favorable results, and to cover prophylactic surgery when it's indicated.
You talk about data. You, with the help of the National Institute of Health, you have, you're the keeper, so to speak, of what will probably become the largest familial cancer database in the country. Because somebody's got to do it, or we're not going to benefit from the knowledge.
That's true.
That's kind of a big undertaking.
It's quite a burden, and we accept it. Again, this absolutely could not be done by myself alone.
Right,
And
it's a
harken
major
back to
project.
That, oh, it's a major project, and we've got such.
I mean the whole
yeah,
the whole team.
the whole team, and Creighton has backed me right up the hilt.
And they backed you
for
early
years.
on when
Early on,
when you weren't a big deal.
yeah,
well, you were a semi-big deal, but not a huge deal.
When I was really not getting the grants, and people thought I was kind of a loony bird making such postulates that such a high frequency of primary genetic factors were responsible. But it has finally come to fruition, and we're just delighted. And again, I have to give credit to our team, my wife, Jane.
Yes, who's been your partner. She's a
all
research
the way,
nurse.
and Sue Tinley and Carrie Snyder and Barb Franklin. The list goes on, and I feel badly listing names because I can't get them all
It's like
in.
the
Yeah,
Academy Awards.
yeah.
You leave one out.
Leave one out, I'm leaving a whole gang out. But they're
let me
great
ask you,
people.
with regard to databases, we are living in a time where information can be transmitted like that, information that we don't want out of huge databases, from something like yours to insurance companies to, just all our medical records, just our personal, what we always consider protected. Do you worry about our privacy in the future and how it might
I
be
do.
used against us?
I'm concerned about that all the time, and that's why we are very careful, and we code the data with its entry into the computer, and are very careful, and we would absolutely never, with any intent, release any of that information without the explicit approval of the patient. So privacy and confidentiality are the top of our concern, and our patients know that.
As a doctor, though, you go back to the beginnings of sort of doctor-patient relationships. Confidentiality was one of the huge things. Do you think that in the future, do you see us being able to, protect our confidentiality? Because insurance companies would like to trade information, and they would like. Is that going to be a battle we're going to win down the road or lose?
If you talk about absolute protection, that's a loser right up front.
We've already lost them
Absolute,
because some,
because the patient himself or herself might ill-advisedly tell someone that is not one that has that patient's interest high in the mind about being a carrier of a gene, and then the word can get out.
Right.
Or it could get out through inadvertently getting onto the patient's medical record, and that's why we tell our patients that we will give them the information. They can share it with their doctor if they wish, and we hope they do. But we also tell them that they should tell their doctor to keep it off the medical record and what we call a shadow file, so the doctor does know what's going on. 'Cause
Well, so
that's
everyone in the office
essential.
doesn't know. I mean,
Well,
these
it
things
could-
happen.
Yeah, it does. That's why I said absolute protection is something we can't guarantee.
But do you think, on the whole, in terms of national policy, that we'll be able to win the battle against, let's say, the big insurance companies and other people interested in our
Yeah,
genetic makeup or
it-
everything about us, that we're going to win the battle?
it has to happen. It has to happen. But from our standpoint,
Well, loose
our
lips sink
confidentiality,
ships, you know.
the confidentiality is secure.
Yeah, but
From
you
our
in the Navy,
standpoint.
loose lips sink ships. I
It-
mean, and
it
that,
does,
That has to do
exactly.
with your own personal health information.
It can happen. Yes, it can.
What is with the human genome mapping? I mean, I assume that at this point in science, even before this, you pretty much were able to compare genes of people that had high incidence in their family and didn't, and find the little genie thing, the little genie in the bottle, so to
Yeah,
speak.
sure.
How significant, though, is the mapping of the entire genome to
Yeah.
researchers like yourself?
Yeah. Well, it's highly significant, but it's a first step. And it's sort
It's
of
not
like
an
a
end,
script.
it's a
no,
beginning.
oh, no. It's the first step. It had to be done so that the code could be used at the next level, and that is gene function. And trying to find out what the gene is really doing. And that is really where progress will go at a rapid clip once we find out what the gene is doing from a biochemical and a physiologic and ultimately from a pathologic point of view.
So really
That-
all we have is the roadmap. We don't know what's at these different locations, what landmarks are there, what pitfalls are there.
We have the first step of the roadmap, and now we have to put it in use. And the person that really was highly responsible for this, Francis Collins, who is a friend of mine, and he would be the first to tell you that in spite of all the glory that he has received, and it's all justly due, that we're just beginning to get a feel for the ultimate objective of control of disease. And that's quite an admission from a man who has done so much in his life that we associate his worth with respect to the genome function.
Well, it
but
may
he's
be
done
the-
many other things.
It may be the beginning of his work, but it's the end of our show. Henry,
Well,
thank you so
time
much for
goes
being
by
with us.
so
We'll
fast.
check back with you in a few years and see what you've done,
That'd be fine.
as if you haven't done enough. Thank you.
Well, bless your heart, and thank you so much.
And thanks for joining us today on Consider This.
Okay. Okie dokie.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates and First Data Resources.